Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's show, and we are going to be covering the perfect check-in this morning and looking at that foolproof process for every landlord and agents to follow when you are speaking to new applicants or candidates for a property for let, and getting that process right from the very, very beginning. And we'll go into it, and I think it's like right from that first interaction and first conversation it starts, Kerin.
It definitely does. From that first inquiry.
You're all too aware of this, and it's so important to get that right. So hopefully we're going to run through today as much as we can to help you guys. Now, a new tenancy is a major milestone in the relationship between you and your new tenant. So with many check-ins and things, they fail to take advantage of that actual opportunity at that initial stage. So, the successful check-in and things is more than just a transactional like checklist and ticking boxes, which are important, but they're your chance to really set that tone for your entire tenancy, really, with you as being viewed as, whether you're agent or a landlord, that trustworthy landlord or agent, and your tenant as that conscientious caretaker, basically, of the property. And this is a really, if you get that relationship right and both feel comfortable in that, you will have a really successful tenancy. Now, to illustrate that, we are going to go through a process, and we've put this guide together, and hopefully it does create for you the perfect check-in process. And that's from that initial contact point to handing over the keys, and then right through the whole tenancy. So we're going to dive into that today, Kerin, and you could, run through what we're going to cover today in this morning's show.
Yeah, so there's a few different aspects that we all take into account when trying to find the perfect tenant, the perfect check-in. So starting as you mean to go on, preparing your property for rent, essential documentation to provide. It's obviously a key one. We are going through this legal process. Boxes to tick for the check-in day, and moving your tenants in correctly. So within this, I think there's a good few bits that we'll be able to cover, a good few tips in here as well. And whether you're looking to seal gaps in your own process or free up your time by handing over the responsibilities to an extra managing agent, all you need for confidence and clarity is right here. It's got some really good tips in amongst this.
Yeah, you said about obviously kicking off with like that whole setting that tone and starting as you mean to go on. And really, you need to set that tone at the very beginning. If the check-in process actually begins, like I said, with that first conversation with any potential candidate or tenant, and before any viewings or anything. So this is at this initial inquiry stage when people, whether it's on the phone, even whether it's through an email or a text message, you could gauge a lot about a person by that first initial contact. And it's all about, at this stage, naturally filtering out the most suitable tenants for the property, and not just for the property, even though it's also about how they possibly operate. So somebody on paper might be brilliant for a property, but when you meet them in person, it might be a different story. And it's not to say they're a bad person or that they just might not be suitable for the situation that possibly where it's located. If it's in a block of flats and it's maybe just not the right tenant to fit in with. Maybe it's all over 60s or something. Just for example, you need to try and think about how they operate and how they would fit into that environment. And you could plant that seed with people at that initial stage, and it can be a really positive seed and professionalize your relationship going forward as landlord and tenant, or agent and tenant, or landlord to tenant and agent. That whole relationship. And first and foremost, one of the most important things is communication. And communicating clearly is so important. Explaining any of the income, your employment and timeline criteria before the viewing is booked to ensure that the tenant is a good fit and to avoid wasting anyone's time. Now, we do a whole pre-qualifying stage, we refer to it as, Kerin, and it really does, as I say, we get to break down who is most suitable. And it does delve into income, employment, how long are you planning to be in the property, when do you want to move, when do you need to move, do you have to give notice where you are, these types of things. And we have had feedback at that stage, thinking, well, I don't need to give you all this information at this stage. I'm only asking to view the property. Well, actually, you do. And being quite reluctant and holding back with that information at those early stages immediately raises a flag to either your landlord or your agent that you're not going to be the most accommodating. And that could be a problem when managing a property. So that's something to bear in mind. If you're a tenant and serious about looking for a property, be very transparent and very willing to share the information that is being asked of you. I mean, is that something that you come up against quite a lot, Kerin? I mean, people coming back at the early stages.
Just in this kind of day and age, like some people might think, oh, why do you want all this information for? And it's literally just to arrange a viewing. That's all it's for. And I do think some people get a little bit paranoid about it, or they are a bit reluctant. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, there's one property can have easily 100 people wanting to see it. So it is a process that you have to go through. And even before pre-COVID, before we had this process in place, we would still ask basic questions such as who's going to be staying in it? Do you have any pets? Are you working? Are you in receipt of universal credits? They're just basic things that you need to know to check that initial compatibility for the property. Even how many children people have for bedrooms. You can have somebody that might be like, oh yeah, I've got 4 kids. And it's like, well, why are you looking at this 2-bed property? Because that's certainly going to be overcrowding. And it eliminates a lot of
unsuitable criteria.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't want to be wasting people's time that effectively isn't going to be suitable for the property. So it saves our time and the person's time as well, and obviously lets us find the right tenant for it.
Yeah, it's so important at that early stage to filter things down. And I think also as well at those initial meetings and things and interactions, whether you're an agent or a landlord and things, you really need to always remember to act professionally and conduct yourself professionally. I'm a very big advocate for the private sector being professionalised, as much as, I mean, all the new legislation and things can be quite tricky, but it is, for the most part, in an aim to professionalise the industry, and I'm all for that. So I think you need to demonstrate the fact that you are a professional. Now, whether you're a self-managed landlord and things, I'm sure you take pride in your properties and how you operate and how you deal with your tenants. Demonstrate that, because it will go a long way to showing that you are a respectable landlord, or indeed, as I say, an agent. Do you know, everything from how you present yourself, how you present your property, it sends that message out about how things are going to be throughout the tenancy and how you act as a landlord to the tenant. And it also kind of outlines what the likely experience is going to be while renting from you. And that could sometimes bode well in your favour if you are demonstrating a very professional outlook and approach, and you are presented well, your property is presented well, and you've got a lot of the things in place that should be as part of, do you know, some tenants who are looking are probably a lot of people choose to rent. We're in a very generation rent, and people will know what to look for in a property as to whether it's going to be a viable let for them. Because some people are inexperienced from letting, and landlords that maybe don't take as much care with their property, they'll pick up on things straight away that that are not right in the property, and that would be a red flag for me as a tenant looking. And but then people that don't have that experience may just look past them, and it only comes to light as tenancy actually starts, and that's where problems start to occur. So yeah, definitely arriving prepared, and I think this goes for everybody all round. I mean, preparation is key. You always say it, Kerin, and it's always true. Showing up for a viewing on time if you're a tenant is something that you really need to show. It shows punctuality. I mean, that's a big part of what your tenancy is going to be. If you're being requested to be present for an inspection, you're expected to pay your rent on time and things. Punctuality is a very important thing. And, you know, turning up to that viewing on time is the first, and it sets that tone, like I say. And these tips, like I said at the beginning, are both, you know, landlord, agent, and tenants and things. You could incorporate this into all your own actions to make the whole all-round experience a good one and a lasting one throughout the tenancy. And, you know, over time and things, with all this information, a tenant may need to make a decision that demonstrates professionalism, and this attention to detail and things will back that up. So definitely always be prepared. and also keeping it, finding that place to rent can really be quite highly stressful for people. They say moving, I think it's marriage, moving, divorce, these are all the most stressful things to do. So moving house and moving into a new rental can be quite stressful. And as we know in the current market, it can be quite competitive. And frictions could arise, when there's a lot of people looking at a lot of properties. So a friendly, reassuring attitude can make a huge difference to tenants. So as well as being quite professional and informative and prepared, don't make it too formal, if that makes sense. Don't be too rigid and formal with people. Be quite relaxed, relatable, and friendly at the same time. Now, you might say that kind of contradicts what you're trying to say, but it's definitely doable. I would hopefully think that I'm like that, and I know that you are, Kerin, as well. That fair and professional, but also friendly and approachable at the same time. These are really good qualities to have as an agent, as a landlord, and I suppose as a person in life. But that's all my key tips for really starting any relationship, especially with landlords and tenants and agents, and starting things as you mean to go on throughout that. And I think just to wrap up on and finally with the starting as you mean to go on type thing, as well as being charming and efficient, which I hope I am as well, it's wise to display a no-nonsense manner as well. That balance between friendly and firm, that shows you are only interested in the tenants who are responsible and reliable. Don't, as well as being friendly and approachable and things, don't be too laxed and feel like, because the tenants may then take that as an opportunity to think, well, I might not pay my rent on time, they won't bother, they're fine. We're friends. So keep that relationship.
Boundaries.
And boundaries. And that's a really important thing as well. As managing agents and things, Kerin, that's something that you're also aware of, that you need to keep the fine line between that relationship, professional and friendly, so that you're not kind of leaving things too laxed when you're trying to manage a property and also collect rent and things as well.
Yeah, we've seen landlords that have maybe opted to put family members or friends into their proproperties, or even just somebody that they know. And as soon as they say it, I'm like, this isn't going to end well. It never does. I think people just kind of tend to blur that line a little bit between the professional and the social side of it. And they do sometimes take liberties, which can be quite difficult, because at the end of the day, your property is an asset to you. It is your investment. And if somebody's not treating it that way, it can be very frustrating. So making sure that you are getting the right tenant in the first place and conducting yourself in that professional, but as you say, finding that balance of still being friendly and approachable, but at the end of the day, you do have to be professional, because it is a business that you're dealing with here. Even if it's one property, it could be 1, it could be 5, 10, you never know. It's still the same balance that you need to find.
Yeah, and and you made a really good point there. And I think, whether you've just got one property or 6 or 7 properties, or even if you've got 40 or 100 properties, doesn't matter. I think that you need to have that uniformed approach, that you treat each one and the way you conduct yourself the same in each way, in order to make it a success. Even if you just have one property, you still want it to be, you don't want it to be problematic, you don't want it to be stressful, you want things to run smoothly, and not just for you, but for the tenant. And if you've got an agent involved, all round, everyone needs to, have that. I mean, not everything's smooth sailing, and I know that, but for the most part, if you can have it really, and it's based on good relationships and clear and defined, expectations of everybody involved. So, but the property itself, yes, is very important. Now, I spoke there about obviously getting off on the right foot and your own attitude and presentation, but the property itself, I mean, preparing your property is the next thing we're going to talk about, Kerin. So I'll let you run through that with us.
Yeah, so before rushing into achieving a same-day change of tenants, consider spending a little extra time getting your property prepared for the next residence. Now, I have seen, with the best intentions, with the best tenant, doing a move-in, even the day after somebody's moved in, it's so much stress. It doesn't give you any time to get anything sorted out. And even the best tenants can sometimes leave things maybe not as clean as they need to, or maybe there's something needed removed, the grass needs cut. You never know until you're actually there doing that checkout, especially even if you've been doing property inspections. Furniture can hide a lot of things as well. So when you're going into that empty property to do your exit inspection, it is going to highlight some more things potentially that might not have been you might not have been aware of prior to this point. So having that little bit of time in between tenants can make a world of difference. There are certain things that you should obviously do to make sure that you're putting your best quality out there with your property. And some of the things you can do for this is such as a professional clean.
Yep.
So showing your tenants that you're obviously, this is the level, the standards that you're expecting the property to come back to as well. If you're getting an inventory done, which you ideally should be at the start of your tenancy, and you've had a professional clean done, it should highlight this. That is then obviously the standard the tenant should be returning the property to.
You know, when you say about the clean, and do you know, some tenants, in fact a lot of tenants, leave the property completely fine, clean and fine to put back on the market. But I always think it's good practice just to possibly do, we call it, well, our cleaning company calls it a sparkle clean. And it's just that once over, wipe down, a bit of a freshen, a vacuum. And I think that's just good practice to possibly 9 times out of 10 do that. I mean, we do have some properties handed back and it's like you wouldn't even know the tenants lived in it. But not everybody's like that. And people have lived in the property and it's quite hard to move and get things, you know, absolutely spick and span. But to hand it over to a new property, a property to a new tenant, it's kind of good practice maybe just to give it that once over, and it gives it that fresh feeling. And again, that's reflected in the inventory.
And everybody has their different standards of clean as well. What's clean to somebody might not be clean to somebody else. So having it nice and clean when they move in, that's setting the standard for it.
Yeah.
But again, in that vacant period, you can be looking to carry out any essential repairs, maintenance, or upgrades. They're much easier to arrange once the property is vacant. You'll be able to remove any of these little niggles that might cause teething problems in your new tenancy. And if you can minimise on the teething issues, it sets your tenancy off to a better start. They're not having to come to you with any problems because everything should be nice, smooth sailing going forward.
Yeah, definitely use that time in between to make sure you've taken care of these points.
And not only inside the property, but if you have outside space as well, making sure it's nice and low maintenance, just making sure that fences are secure, any gates, it's all maintained, cut back, and obviously well presented for your next tenancy. And again, that sets the stance for how you're expecting the property to be returned at the end of the tenancy. And again, some people think they've cut the grass and it's maybe been left for a little bit longer than it needs to be. So it's good to make sure it's all done and weeded as well.
Yeah, there's even one I've had recently, and it is a low maintenance garden and it's all paved and things, but it's been empty for a while and it's to go back on the market. But when I was late and I was like, oh, the weeds have all come through in between the paving stones and things, and it just looks untidy. So it's going to need the gardener or somebody to go in and just give it the once over before we do viewings and things, because it just for a few weeds, but it makes it look untidy. So yeah.
Even just when that property is vacant, I find it so much easier finding a tenant as well, being able to do the viewings in an empty property so tenants can see what it's actually like. And again, it eliminates more of a scope for there to be any issues at the start, because if there's things that maybe they've not noticed because a couch has been there or a bed's been in the way, and then it comes out and you've got a bit of a surprise at the end of the tenancy, or maybe the carpets aren't in the condition that they thought they were because there was furniture on them and you couldn't see it as well. So just finding a tenant, I feel like it seems to go a lot smoother when you're doing viewings in an empty property that's maybe you're just using that time to get a few wee bits and pieces done, but it gives the tenants a clearer image of what they're going to be moving into as well.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the final pro tips for preparing your property is using security keys that need special authorization to be copied, saving the need for locks to be changed in between tenancies, and it gives new tenants peace of mind. So you've got that option.
This is something that we've come up against in the past year or two, a lot more than we have in previous, because I think that new doors and door locks and things have started to use these new keys, and they're a lot harder to get cut, and there's master ones that you need to cut from, and you know, it's not just gone are the days from just you get the key cut and it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it's a lot different. So
the only downside to that is if your tenant does lose the keys, it's good to have, obviously, usually when you get locks changed, you get 3 sets of keys anyway. So ideally your tenant's got 2, you've got a set. Whether you're the managing agent, you should be the one holding that spare set. Or if you are dealing with it directly as a landlord, you should have a spare key for it as well. But it does mean that if the tenants do lose their keys, it's going to cost them more to get it cut, because obviously they'll have to cover the charge for that. And they could have to wait for it coming. So it can be a little bit trickier on that side. So at the same time, you just go for cheap barrels that you can swap out throughout tenancies.
Yeah, that's quite simple to do that, and that's quite a good way to do it between tenancies. Again, it's good practice, whether the tenant returns all the keys that was handed over, it's still good practice to possibly change the lock. And an easy and cost-effective way to do that is to have extra barrels to change, and that's generally in the UPVC doors. But you can do that quite easily, and most doors are UPVC. But I like how you emphasise the fact that the agent holding the keys, because it's on a few occasions we'll have to remind, if we are, or if any managing agent is acting on behalf of a landlord, the landlord cannot hold a copy of the keys for the property. They have to be with the agent, not the landlord. So if you're using a managing agent and you're a landlord, you shouldn't also hold keys technically. And for the most part, that's what we always insist on that. But we've had to remind a few landlords about that over the years. Yeah.
So there's a good few tips for obviously getting your property prepared, but obviously we do have essential documents to provide. So Richard, do you want to cover them?
Yes, there's the essential documents and things that you do have to provide at that point of check-in and things. And if you want to have a legally sound check-in process, it requires giving your new tenant a series of documents, and there are quite a few. And not to make it sound overcomplicated, because I always, sometimes when I speak to new landlords and people that are new to all this, I try not to overwhelm them. I know you're the same, Kerin, because to go through it all sometimes can be a bit overwhelming, especially if it's new to you. Whereas really there is a methodical approach to it, and it can be done without a lot of stress. So although there is a series of documents, and I'm going to run through the following documents that need to be supplied before the tenancy starts. So we typically email these all out, Kerin, before the tenancy start date. And they're also provided hard copies on the day in the move-in pack and things that they move into the property. But first and foremost is the energy performance certificate. Now that's one of the first ones that we need. We need to put that on the listing material before we even market a property. We need to display the energy performance certificate, which shows the energy efficiency rating and the environmental impact that the property has. And that needs to, like I say, go on all the lettings literature before the tenancy's even begun. Now these certificates have a 10-year lifespan, and if you've made improvements in things during that time, you could have it updated and things as well. Now, EPC banding, I don't want to sidetrack too much. We have obviously minimal EPC banding coming in very imminently. C is the minimum rating for rental properties in Scotland, and as of I think then 2028, if you've got an existing tenancy, then all existing tenancies are going to have to be at that level as well. There's going to be grants and things and allowances for making upgrades and getting a property to a level C, because I know a lot of properties will struggle very much to get to that level. But as I say, not to sidetrack too much, I think there's a show that we've done before. Usually I would have the link actually in the blog above to direct you to that, but I'm sure we've done a whole show on EPCs at some point. So if you go back the playlist, you will be able to see them on the YouTube channel. But yeah, EPC, energy performance certificates, this first one. Electrical safety is such a big thing over the last, what we now, 7-8 years in, I think something like that.
Yeah,
I think it was 17.
We had a lot of changes in 2017.
So electrical safety, which here in Scotland is electrical installation condition reports. They're valid for 5 years at a time. You've got your gas safety, which is still for me the paramount, the most important one. You need your landlord gas safety check, not a gas service, done annually on all gas appliances. That's the boiler, gas, cookers or hobs, and fires and things as well. And they need to be done every 12 months. And you should have a reminder system to remind you before the 12 months to have it done, not on the 12 months, because then in that period while you're trying to renew it, it's technically out of date. So if anything happens, you are liable as the landlord. Even if you have an agent, the liability goes back to the landlord. So always make sure that you've got an agent who's on the ball with your gas safety certificates, or if you've got your own system and you're self-managed, that you have a good reminder system, especially for gas safety. And identifying any hazards that must be fixed before your tenant moves in as well. If there's anything like that, please make it the primary thing that you do to make sure that these are addressed well before the tenancy starts. The government's guide we have the easy read notes that goes alongside the private residential tenancy here in Scotland. It's the the government's how to rent guide in England and Wales. And as I say, tenant information pack here in Scotland. Again, we email that out prior to the tenancy starting as well. So, and that covers quite a lot. I mean, the easy read notes, Kerin, is like 38 pages long or something. Quite a lot. Quite a lot, yeah. So to print that off in hard copy and things to give to a tenant, especially if you're managing a lot of properties or if you've got a big portfolio, it's quite a lot. It can be done in email, and that's fine as long as you've got that to the tenant prior to the tenancy starting for them to review.
If your tenancy ever does become problematic going forward as well, and worst case the council are involved, they will ask for confirmation that these have been sent to the tenant in the first place. And the amount of tenants that are like, no, I don't have my gas safety check. And it's like, well, this is the email where it was sent to you. Yeah. So having that, and then obviously it's good for them to have it in paper, but if you've got it in email, that is your trace that this was provided to them at the start of the tenancy. Yeah,
I mean, I remember doing move-ins, I hate to admit, over a decade ago and more, but and it was meet on the day with the documents, and there was no, there was email, but we didn't email things out, and it was like less of a digital process. But now it's very much what we do. I mean, we do digital signatures on tenancy agreements, and everything goes out prior to the move-in and things as well, and it keeps that record. And like you say, if there's things at the end, if we're at the end of a tenancy and we're dealing with the council and things like that, there will be requests for this information and requests for when to prove when these were issued and when they were handed over. So you really need to have your records quite thoroughly in place, and having email and timestamps and things are definitely the way forward. Although now mistakes in this area can come back to bite you, and that, as I say, it's so important, especially when it comes to safety certificates and things. And if it comes back to bite you, it's going to be financial penalties, possibly problems getting your property back. Now, if you're trying to regain, and that's kind of what you were highlighting there, Kim, if you're trying to regain possession of, or vacant possession of your property, and possibly the tenants are going to the council or the local authority for housing, the council will come back and ask for these things. And if you don't have them, then the tenant will not be awarded housing to move on and could just stay put. Then you will have a lengthy process to try and regain vacant possession through a first tier tribunal. Not a process you want to be involved in for any great length of time, and it can become quite lengthy. So please be quite meticulous and pay good attention to dates and detail. It's absolutely crucial. It really is. So then that brings me to, if we are doing all this preparation and documents just prior to the move-in, Kerin, you do a lot of our move-ins and things still. What's the boxes to tick on that day of check-in?
So moving in day can test everyone's nerves, and a pre-move-in checklist can be a priceless tool for having a super smooth agreement, and obviously just making sure that things are going to go to a nice smooth start at the beginning of the tenancy. So some of the boxes you can look to get ticked off is confirming that the tenant's first month's rent and security deposit are in your account. Then sign the tenancy agreement with its detailed inventory and get your tenant to do the same. So obviously I would be making sure that money's in the account and the lease is signed for handing the keys over for it. Typically you would want your tenant to have paid a deposit prior to this for taking the property off the market if you have been doing any advertisement with it. And then obviously first month's rent due. We usually ask our tenants to have it paid the day prior to their move-in date, so we have cleared funds in the account for being able to release the keys to them at the time of their move-in. Taking clear photos of the electric, gas, and if you're in England, water meters on moving in day, then sending them over to your tenant so they can notify the utility supplier. It is good practice to make sure that you're closing down your account as well. If you've had a property with a void period, or if this is the first time you're putting it up for rent, notify your utility supplier that you're no longer the person in charge of the utility account, and it'll be passed on to the tenant. And same with the council as well. Make sure your council tax account is all closed down. They can give you a lot of bother moving forward if these are not done correctly. You can end up with complaint letters.
Smiling from experience, Kerin, I know you are.
Oh, very much so, unfortunately. So make sure your utility accounts are closed down correctly for your tenants to start their new ones. Having pictures of the meters can obviously be really essential there as well if there are any discrepancies about it. If you have an inventory, if you have a good inventory clerk, they should be included within your inventory as well. So there is no dispute there about them.
I was just going to say our inventory clerk is really good. We get pictures of the keys, the meters, tests all the smoke alarms, and everything. And the inventory is done the day before, at the very latest 2 days before, but it's generally the day before, and that's all documented. So that's really good. So to have somebody that's really thorough and quite comprehensive in doing your inventory checks the day prior to move-in is a big help.
And as you say, he checks all of our smoke alarms, but if you are a landlord doing this privately, checking your smoke alarms and your carbon monoxide alarms are working on that day that the tenancy starts. Even if you check them the day before, you can provide written confirmation to your tenant that you've done the test and that they're all in working order.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously, not that it applies in Scotland, but if you are in England, and you have new tenants that are non-UK citizens, remember to take copies of their right to rent documents before they move in.
Yes.
So being prepared makes a huge difference on a very stressful day for some people. A great step in showing that your tenants, that they've made the right choice going with yourself for the property, and laying the foundations for an easy and enjoyable tenancy for everyone, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think that keeps it keeps all those boxes ticked and everything in order, and like it's basically tick the boxes on check-in day, and these are the things definitely to have in place. There is process, the correct kind of process to actually move the tenant in correctly, and there's things that you should go through with your tenant on the actual day in person at the property. And although new tenants will be really eager to start unloading their van and get moved in, but there's some basic information that you need to run through with them just to ensure that they are fully set up from the minute they move in and they know what's expected of them as the tenant in that property. First off, and this is funny, I'm going to say this one, but you show your new tenants how the locks work on the doors and the windows and things as well, just so that they know the basic information of how to, keep the property secure. We were actually talking through the week about one that we've got a church, is it a church conversion or it's part of a church? And there was a bit of a knock to one of the doors. I think it was a fire door.
Yeah, we have a fire door. That's what we've been talking about today. And literally, I just have to stand and just keep turning the key until it eventually opens. But the tenant now actually showed me there is like a little bit of a knack to it. So he was able to show me. I've not tried it yet, so we'll see if it works. But just obviously daily experience, whereas I usually just stand there and just keep turning the key until I eventually
I think ideally we might look at if there's a way to possibly rectify it. I mean, it does open, but there's like a bit of a knack to it, which isn't ideal. But it just, as soon as I was thinking about that, making sure that they know how to unlock and lock the doors and windows correctly to keep the place secure, that was what come to mind, that one that we had spoken about. So,
I was thinking of the one that we had last week that we went and checked, and it's another one of these, the keys that have got like all the dots on them. So one of your like keys, again, that we've mentioned earlier, quite hard to get cut, expensive to get cut. But there's a bit of a knack for the angle that the barrel has to sit at to get the key actually out the door. So I was turning it, I was like, why is this not coming out? And it's because it has to sit at a quarter angle.
Yes.
And you don't know it until you're actually doing that. So just little things like that. Yeah, little things like that to tell your tenants about can make it a lot easier, rather than the first time they try to go out the door, they can't get it to lock. Not exactly.
And they feel like there's something wrong and they're on the phone and it's like, no, this is how the new lock works. They should have really been showed that when they moved in. So yeah, definitely. A really important one is to demonstrate how the heating system works. If it's gas boilers, if it's electric, immersion heaters, the timer, the thermostat, the controls, bleeding the radiators, and that all important, topping up the pressure if it drops on a combi boiler or a combi system. That is something that is our number one call out issue, low pressure on a boiler. And although we know how to troubleshoot with that over the phone through years of experience, it is a tenant's responsibility to be able to know how to do that. But not everybody has that knowledge. So to educate them and show them at the move-in, look, if the pressure drops slightly on the boiler, then this is how you top it up. Obviously, if a pressure drop's a recurring thing quite often, then it's a bigger problem in the system, a breach in the system, and does need to be addressed. But generally, a combi system, once or twice a year, it will drop in pressure.
I actually had a move-in this week, and when I went, usually I go to the move-in at least 5 minutes before the tenants are meant to be there, just to do a quick walkthrough, make sure everything does it should be, and check what kind of boiler it is and what the controls are like, because I know I'm going to have to tell the tenant how to use it. And obviously we're in and out of so many different properties, they're all different. So just a quick look, usually I'm explaining it to them after just figuring it out 5 minutes ago, but I've still taken the time to suss out how to use it, so then I can tell them how to do it. And the moving that I went to, I checked the boiler pressure and it was sitting in the red. So it was a good experience to be able to show the tenants, look, this is what you don't want, this is how we rectify it, this is your filling loops, you can see it's going up, remember to close them when you're done.
Close the valves,
and that's tenant overpressure in the boiler, so making sure you're educating them on how to do that properly is obviously an important thing, because if the boiler is sitting in low pressure, it might not work. And just being able to simply, it takes 2 minutes to do, top up the pressure, boiler's working again.
So that, you're right, that's giving you the perfect opportunity to actually demonstrate it to them. You're right though, some boilers, even though they're right down low pressure, will still run and operate, but they will run very inefficiently. You won't get as hot water, you won't, and it could be actually quite costly as well to do it. That coupled with possibly if a radiator needs bled or whatever, your heating system cannot be maybe working or running as efficiently as it should be. So I could think of one actually that a bled radiator topped up the pressure and their house has never been hotter, but they didn't know how to do that. So anyway, but yeah, it's all about.
These aren't things that you really get taught in school. Like, I wouldn't know these things unless I was doing this job. That's the only reason I do, really. So there's a lot of people, and it's like this 20-odd-year-old turns up and they're teaching like somebody in their 40s or 50s or 60s how to top up the pressure on a boiler, but they've never had to do it. So there's been no reason for them to know it, but it is really useful to know. And like you say, bleeding radiators as well, learn that at work.
Yeah, and I think it's like what you say as well. A lot of boilers and systems are all different, but once you get the knack for what is actually meant to be happening, you can generally work it out quite easily and quite quickly. Like you say, give you 5-10 minutes to just make sure you know what you're doing with that system, and then you teach them.
And if you do have one that's more complicated, I mean, the internet's a wonderful thing. You can usually put your make and model into YouTube, for example, and you'll be able to find, here's how you work it, here's how you top up the pressure. So there are different ones. I know somebody in the boiler is so awkward to top up the pressure, and there's a whole key system for it. And it's the most awkward thing. It's doable, but you have to know how to do it and where to put the key into and make sure you don't lose the key. So there are some that are more complicated.
There's a thing about maybe having the confidence to think, right, I could do that, like I could sort this. Whereas a lot of people don't think and don't even want to touch a boiler because they think it's going to blow up. Your boiler will not blow up. But anyway, that's another thing to educate. A lot of people think that. Anyway, so. And a really important one as well to point out when you're moving people in is the stopcock for turning off the mains water. If there's ever a leak in the property, I mean, if a tenant phones with a leak, the first thing you tell them to do is turn the water off. But just make sure they know where that is. They might not think straight away to do that, but at least when you get on the phone and say to them, right, turn the water off, and all right, I know where that is, and turn it off. So where the stopcock is, how to turn it off. The fuse box for the electrics, now generally they're in a lot of the same locations in certain properties, but sometimes they could be hidden away and quite hard to find. Make sure they know where that is, so they've got access to the trip switches, so they could get the electric back on if it trips for whatever reason. And that's something that would be a phone call and time taken up by you or your agent, when really you show them at the beginning, they'll know how to go and do that. And that saves on emergency call-outs and things as well for something that could be rectified by the tenant.
And obviously, as a landlord as well, just making sure like your stopcock, for example, is accessible to a tenant. It's not behind concealed like kickboards, because they are usually in a kitchen. So making sure the tenant can actually get access to it and it works as well. You get some that have been here for a long time. They've obviously not been used really, so they've maybe seized or they don't shut off the water properly. So making sure it is accessible. I had one the other day that it's all completely refurbished, and obviously they've put new plumbing in, which was very handy considering one of the fixtures of the outside tap had burst and was spraying water all over the garden. And thankfully it was outside, so it wasn't causing any damage, but because it was nice new plumbing, I was able to find the shut-off valve for the outside tap. Doesn't even need to be for the whole property, just for that tap, and turn it off, and that stopped the water spraying until the landlords can obviously get out to replace that little section of the tap.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So, but yeah, nice, easy plumbing makes a difference.
These are all the things that if you pass on this information can make for an easy and smooth running tenancy. And I think for me, a final point as well, I know it's not always easy to do it, but if you can provide instruction manuals, if you've got appliances in a property that are part of the let, if you have an instruction manual for your certain type of boiler, whether that's digital PDFs or whether you do have an actual hard copy and you leave it in the property, it's quite good. We have some really very prepared landlords who leave a folder with all the manuals and user guides and things in the property, and that's great. And it does help tenants quite a lot when they have issues and they are able to use everything without any hiccups and needing to contact either you or your managing agent. As I say, it's not something that's necessary or required, but it's a good help.
Yeah, it's handy to have if you do have a folder that you can keep ones in. Whenever tenants move out, I'm like, well, whenever I'm moving tenants in, say to them, please keep that folder safe and please leave it at the end of the tenancy.
Yeah. So I think that's us, and we'll wrap up this morning. Hopefully that's been a real good insight into the perfect check-in. I mean, if hopefully you've listened to that and think, right, that's brilliant, all that information I'm setting out for the perfect check-in. If not, and you've got any other questions, always feel free to reach out to myself or Kerin. You could jump in the comments, we'll come back to you. You could reach out to us directly. My direct email is in the blog that's attached to this post. It's richard.cook@fiveproperties.co.uk, and you could reach out to myself or any of the team. And we'd love to show you how to get tenancies off to a brilliant start and keep them that way and running smoothly for a long time as well, and help them to last long as well. I think longevity is the key here, and in order to have that with any tenancy or investment portfolio and properties within that, it's getting it all right in the first instance and having everybody aware of what their responsibilities are. And as I said, happy tenant, happy landlord, happy agent. It's a very symbiotic relationship if you get everything right. So hopefully those tips have helped, and thanks very much, Kerin, for all your insights as usual.
You're welcome.
Good. I'll leave it there this morning, and as I say, jump in the comments, guys. I'll come back to you all. You can catch us on the rerun, and of course the podcast and the blog is attached, as I said. And we'll leave it there this morning, and I'll catch you next time.
See you later.
Bye, Kerin.